Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Commandos Season 1, Episode 2. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So a good chunk of this episode revolves around us finding out more about the bride, how she came to be. Once again, I know a little bit of the more Frankenstein and Frankenstein's monster story, so I know some of it, but not all of it. So because I want to say what was the most recent version of that was Penny Dreadful, maybe the most recent. And obviously I watched that I think a couple years after he had finished. So I think that was the most recent interpretation of that story I've seen. But the whole thing of, hey, the monster wants a bride. Once again, they also don't cover this either, why the monster's known as Frankenstein. I mean, that's always been this very popular misconception where people are oh, the monster is Frankenstein. It's no, the monster is Frankenstein's monster. Victor's last name is Frankenstein, the scientist, the monster's father. So I wonder, did he take, I need a name and I never had one. Well, no, he does have one because it's Eric. But I wonder, he is technically Victor's son, so it might be a thing of his name is Eric Frankenstein. So that might be what it is. But either way, that might be what that comes into, because they haven't really talked about that. He's not Frankenstein's monster. He's just called Frankenstein, even though that's why I was kind of confused, because I was well, I know Victor is Victor's name is Frankenstein, so I was what does that mean about his monster? So it's it could just be because he's technically Frankenstein's son, he took his father's last name type of thing, right? But either way, he wanted love. He wanted a companion, and it's understandable. And he waxes on poetically. I don't know, in the original text of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein or not, whether or not the monster. I get the feeling, especially considering how old the story is and what the monster represents in a very philosophical manner and stuff like that. That he would have this. He would wax poetically about things in his manner of speak of how he wants love. It's right, I'm the only one of my kind in this world. You made me, Father. Do I not deserve love? And so ended up making her from the pieces. And then you kind of get into this deeper conversation, and I'm sure other Frankenstein stories have covered this. Was the whole much? It's kind of the once again the boat of Theseus thing of how many pieces of it does it make of are you even the same person anymore when you're made up of so many other pieces? So how much of who, she's made from so many different people. It's hard to say. It's not the head who the bride it came from is that person's personality. She's a newborn. And that was an interesting conversation that Victor tried to have with his monster with Eric, where he says hey, a newborn has the benefit of being in its mother's womb. It had this protection, this shelter. So there's a connection there. There's something to tether you. She came from nothing to life instantly. So it's becoming very overwhelming. And obviously, Eric freaks her out and scares her. But he's no, but I love you. I brought you flowers. It's just because that's what it comes down to. And I think maybe the argument could be there. Not even an argument. It's the sad tragedy of it all. It's right, you wanted a companion and you're upset because nothing worked the way you wanted it to. You wanted things to go. You had it planned out in your head oh, it's going to be this, and I'm going to have a companion. We're going to be in love, yada, yada, yada. And to be rejected by her, probably feeling he was rejected by so many people. It's I wanted someone to exist in this world that would accept me and love me for me, just for you to feel abandoned and left behind by them. Especially when you have the complicated nature of your bride and your father hooking up. That's a whole complicated feeling in itself, But I kind of wondering if that was the direction that was going to go. And I thought it seems like it was a mutual situation, but I thought maybe Victor would kind of overstep his boundaries, because we know he had a wife and kids. So he had a family of his own, which is, messed up on his part, but still. My point is, I went on a diatribe, but my point was, right, it's out of selfishness, which, that Eric wanted someone to love him, and he wanted to love someone, but I think more so than anything, it's you want it to be loved more than you want it to love someone, because you want it to find, love kind of gives a lot of meaning to life, and his life kind of didn't have as much meaning, because I was birthed out of my own, out of Victor's curiosities and stuff like that, wanting to toe that line between life and death, and what could come from the other side of all of this, that curiosity, so it wasn't out of some grand gesture or whatever. It was just out of curiosity, and Frankenstein, for Eric to kind of continue that on with the bride, where it's just like, do you not have the best of intentions? You disguise it as like, but it's like, yeah, it comes from a place of selfishness. You wanted love, like you weren't thinking about like, oh, what's best for your bride. You don't care. All you cared about was what you wanted, to the point he started choking Victor at one point during the episode, because it's like, yo, you failed. You were supposed to make someone who loves me, but it's like, it hasn't worked. He was even getting upset with Victor, like teaching her words, because in his mind it's like, right, words get in the way of our true feelings and yada 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 yada. It is kind of this thing of like, once again, he had his image of what he wanted this to be, and the fact is she became more and didn't fit the narrative and picture of what he wanted. He was so dismissive and discounted her, type of thing of just like, I want to mold her into who I want her to be, where it feels like Victor, you know, it depends on, like, if you want to look at it from a positive standpoint, you could be like, oh, Victor's giving her an opportunity to find her own way, to be her own person, to discover who she is. Or you could look at it maybe pessimistically and be like, oh, Victor's molding her into who he wanted her to be, type of thing. So, you know, and obviously, like, the constant flashbacks between, the constant cutback between the past and present day with all of this, because Nina's with the bride, and, you know, Nina has her points that she's trying to talk to her about all this, but the bride is, she tells a little bit about her story about coming into this world, you know, and it's like Nina's kind of scared about the shock from all of this, but then the bride's like, oh, come on, like, the fact is that it kind of makes sense why the shock probably wouldn't be as much to her, considering, like, well, what I've been through, I came into this world because of electricity, being shocked isn't as bad, you know, because you're talking about being shocked and incapacitated versus being shocked and being kind of immediately at 100 miles per hour, just kind of being thrown into existence, you know. So they also had this interesting conversation about, like, being human and not, and that saying that Nina's like the only one on the crew that's human, which I was like, oh, that's interesting. It's like, because that made me go like, wait, so even Dr. Phosphorus was never human? And it's like, even though she's made from pieces, she's never technically been human, the bride. But it's like, I guess Phosphorus never was. I don't know enough about Dr. Phosphorus to know, like, what his circumstances are. Because I was about to say, like, do you, like, maybe he was human, but now he no longer is. Just like the bride was technically multiple humans, but now she's no longer human. Obviously, G.I. Robot and Weasel makes sense. But I was like, I wonder if that's supposed to imply, like, Nina's supposed to be a meta then. Like, because it's like, they're saying that she's human and stuff like that. I was like, oh, I guess she's just a straight up meta in that regard. I wonder what her circumstances are. Like, I wonder, does she have any, like, Atlantean connections? Because she had brought up I think she brought up her parents, didn't she? She talked a tiny bit about her family. I don't think she really went into depth about it. But I'm like, I don't know if she's tied to, like, I mean, obviously I'm only basing this on, like, because I'm not well versed in all things Atlantis, DC-wise. My only knowledge of it is from the first Aquaman movie, because I've still haven't seen the second one yet. But the whole, like, there's different, like, kingdoms and stuff like that. I wonder, does she come from one of them or something like that? Or maybe she is Atlantean. I don't know. Because some people under the sea are more fish than human. To be fair, like, well, I guess it depends on the continuity, because I don't know if Arthur is always half human, half Atlantean, or whether he is full Atlantean. And because, like, the Atlanteans do look humanoid anyway, so I don't know. So that's what I'm wondering about her circumstances. I just thought that was interesting, that little dialogue aspect of it. I was curious why she was after, was it the necklace that she was after? And, like, well, we saw that it got presented to her initially because it was like, okay, Victor's trying to teach her words, and ultimately the necklace ended up being a gift because he saw how much she liked it, and he got it for her and even put it on her. And it's like, oh, that's where I was kind of like, oh, something happened between you. And in that moment, I was like, oh yeah, Victor's going to get murdered by Eric. That's why you hate him so much. And lo and behold, that happened because he watched him bang it out, and then he, like, killed Victor, saying, like, oh, like, the way he laughs and giggles and all that, that was him interfering with our love. But now that he's gone, now that obstacle is gone, we can be in love. Like, rather than taking that internally and recognizing, like, why does my bride who was meant to be for me, why does she choose Victor over me? Like, no, you were made for me, not for him. Like, and I'm sure for him it feels like an even bigger betrayal. Like, you were my father, you made her to love me, yet you took her for yourself. That it's like not taking in consideration that she has her own agency, that she chose to be with Victor. Once again, it's a complicated thing. He's your father and also your lover, and just that kind of gets a little, it's incestual in its own right, just because it's like he's your creator and you're naturally going to have this like deeper bond and connection to him than you would anyone else. So you would, anything between you and Eric can never quite compare, because he showed you a gentleness. He was always soft with you, whereas Eric was so adamant about love and stuff like that. He was so brash and so quick about it that it's just like he was overbearing, whereas like I said, Victor came with a soft hand type of situation, extended out his hand. So, and especially when you add in the fact that he's basically been stalking her for the past less than what was it, like 1831, or was it like 18? It was 18 something, but it's like, let's say like a century and a half, maybe a little more. It's probably like over a century and a half of him stalking you down. Every time you're trying to start over around the world, he's constantly coming after you over and over and over again. And it's like we saw like throughout, like I said, the centuries, throughout the decades, like them constantly running into each other, and it's like understandable why you'd be so frustrated with everything with him. So obviously this trip down memory lane got interrupted because Cersei shows up, and the bride proceeds to kick everyone's asses. I don't know if she's killing anyone, but I mean, she's tossing people like through walls. That one guy got slammed into the wall. He kind of folded like a folding chair. Not fully, but I mean, it's hard to say whether or not he died or not. But yeah, she was tossing people. I mean, there's definitely clear deaths when we saw her like literally blasting people. But I'm curious, like, she is superhumanly strong and she's not human, but I'm sure like in kind of probably like zombie rules, if you destroy her brain, she probably dies, because she bothered blocking bullets. So it's like, no, because I guess even in her body, she's not invulnerable. So sustain enough damage, she will die again too. Because like she bothered like taking like to shield herself from like the onslaught of bullets. So that makes me go like, oh, probably it's sustained enough bullets. Might not even just need to be head damage. Like probably like if she sustains enough human damage of like her organs get destroyed or something like that, or her heart gets destroyed, or she might die too. So. But I mean, you got to give it up to her. Like she was like giving it to Cersei. It's like she was against magic and still held her own. I guess the whole point was like, as long as I like keep you like from being able to really focus your magic, that kind of gives me the like overwhelming advantage. Even though like, because I mean, Cersei is from Themyscira. I know like, because I mean, she tussles a little bit but she heavily relies on magic. It's not like Diana, who's just like, cause Wonder Woman can just like brute force it. She has superhuman strength, so that's why that's what I'm trying to think like what Cersei's circumstances are. That is she just a regular Themyscirian? Because like even just once again, my knowledge of the Themyscirians is just like the Wonder Woman movies, where it's just like there was never really any display of like the Amazonians were just, so that's why like Cersei's circumstances might be different from like the typical Amazonians and stuff like that. But it's like because they're just like straight up warriors, but she like heavily relies on magic and stuff. So I don't know. I did like that effect of like when she like was blocking all those bullets and it ended up turning them into like butterflies or whatever. With her magic, or maybe it was like pieces of the vehicle like something got thrown at her and she ended up like turning it into pieces of a butterfly. But like for a second I almost wondered, I was like, can the bride fly? But I'm like, no, I guess because Cersei's flying through their battle trying to break away from her, and that momentum is allowing like the bride just to hold on and just kind of keep wailing on her. And like I said, the bride was kind of giving it just but like Cersei still got the upper hand. She kind of well, she turned the tides when she literally turned the bride's arms into like inflatable balloons. I'm like, that really hampered that fight for her, and then just pushed her off the edge and she kind of fell. She didn't die, but I'm sure she got some broken bones and stuff like that in her body. Poor Nina, her mask or her helmet got damaged, and she's like gasping because she needs water to sustain herself. Very like a la SpongeBob and Patrick in Sandy's Dome in SpongeBob. Why is that the reference I pull from? I've been listening to stuff recently that's been bringing up SpongeBob, and it's like very classic. It's like one of the early SpongeBob episodes that just kind of forever ingrained in my mind. And some SpongeBob stuff has come up recently that made me go like, oh man, classic SpongeBob. That kind of just the point of reference I just immediately go with. So I even love like the bride apologizing to her. Nina's like, go fuck yourself. It's just like, because Nina the entire time was trying to be friendly with her, but she immediately was so dismissive and being very mean. And she's like, I wanted to go back, but you're the one that wanted to come back here. So now you want to be all like, oh, sorry. It's like, no, fuck you. So at the same time, this is all going down. We have Princess Alana taking care of Rick Flag Sr. and treating his wounds and stuff. I think I completely missed this last episode. I don't know how I did. Like the whole scene with her mom where it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to be queen soon and stuff. That was interesting how like the bride looked at her like she knew something. Where I was like, well, that kind of immediately added kind of a suspicious tone to the princess because she's just waiting for her opportunity to take the throne. So I feel like she's probably getting close to Rick Flag Sr. just to be like, oh yeah, when I kind of have my inevitable evil turn, hey, maybe she won't. Maybe she'll be good. This might not necessarily be and this isn't equatable. It's not the exact same, but it's kind of a nearby point of reference I could use. It's a Suicide Squad isekai where it's like I said, well, spoilers, it ended up not being a princess, but ended up being a queen. I never thought the princess was evil. I figured the queen was, but there ended up being extenuating circumstances with that. But I just feel like we might get the twist where it's like, no, the princess is evil in this. And she might be just like getting close to Rick Flag Sr. just for that purpose. It's just like, right, keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer, and that she's trying to manipulate him so that once she gets her power, like, I don't, well, because they're there to protect her. So I was about to say, not unless there's going to be a situation. Well, then, I could definitely see that being a possibility where it's like, hey, Cersei seems to be the main threat you got to deal with, but then like, Princess Alana ends up becoming like the main threat later on. We'll see how that all shakes out, but I just get that feeling from her, especially because she reiterates it this episode. She's like, oh, like I'm going to soon be queen, and what I want, I get. And then her and Rick Flag Sr. proceed to bang it out. And I love that Phosphorus is stopping like their guard, being like, oh, no, come on, like, they're in there doing this thing. He's like, just give him 30 seconds. The fact is, he can't go that low. And then Weasel says something. He's like, actually, Weez, you bring up a good point. He is older and more experienced. Give him a full minute. And I love the guy was like, are you smiling? He's like, no, you can't. He's like, I'm a skeleton. It always looks like I'm smiling, even if I'm not. So he's like, so you're not smiling? He's like, oh, yeah, I am, but you can't tell that. So, but yeah, Phosphorus wanted to give him a chance to like, bust his nut. And I love that. It's just like, you're just listening to the sex sounds in the background. So I love that. It's just like, yeah, and they're done. Okay, now we can tell them about Bride and Nina being missing. And it's like, oh, why didn't you tell me soon? He's like, yo, I try to have your back. I try to be a bro and let you bust a nut. He's like, oh yeah, we're bros. Even though it was literally like almost 2 hours ago, you were trying to murder me. So I was like, come on, let's go. So obviously shit's kind of hit the fan. Obviously, the bride got knocked out by one of Nina's, by Cersei's people. So I guess they're going to be held hostage or whatever. I guess to kind of be used as a negotiation for the kind of, because she already knew like, oh, you were sitting here by the U.S. government. But once again, the bride and just kind of went to like fighting her. So it's just like that conversation didn't get to continue. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where the next episode goes, especially because, well, we know Frankenstein or Eric knows where the bride is, so he's going to show up like he's always done. So that's going to be something everyone's going to contend with, especially Cersei, considering you're the one who took Eric. So it might work to the bride's benefit that he's so obsessed with her that he's coming here. So we'll also see whether the rest of the squad can help out or not. I also love that line from GI Robot. It's like, oh, is this guy pointing to Phosphorus being like, is he a Nazi? It's like, no, he's not a Nazi, GI Robot. And GI Robot's like, oh, okay. And just so disappointed. Once again, he's like, I'm trying to find me a Nazi. It's definitely got to be a situation where it's like, hey, all these people, it's kind of like another weird point of reference, a Waterboy situation of, pulling a little, wasn't his character named Bobby Boucher? I have not seen that movie in so damn long. Just like the people you hate the most or whatever, imagine them. That whole tactic, like they might pull something like that with GI Robot, but show just continues to be a lot of fun, and I'm so excited to see fun but also very sad and tragic with the bride's backstory we got. But yeah, I'm really interested to find out about the rest of our Task Force M, and also see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. Going forward, it's going to be one episode a week, so do keep that in mind. Really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, love life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.